Okay, let's get started. Hi, I'm Patricia Cohen. I'm a reporter with the New York Times. I cover the national economy. I'm very pleased to be here with this panel. I won't go into the introductions because too long because you have them all here, but let me start with both our host and sponsor, John White, who is the president of Taco, located Taco.
Yeah.
Taco, okay.
If you buy it, you can call it anything you want.
Okay, great. It's a $200 million manufacturing company. Then we have Amy Sell over there, who is running Community Ventures in Michigan, which is focused on getting some of the most disenfranchised into jobs. And then at the end, Walter Siegenthaler, Dateweiler, right, Executive Vice President, did I pronounce that correctly, of the Max Dateweiler Corporation. And I'm very interested to see that you actually worked as an apprentice in Switzerland, and that's one of the topics that I hope we can cover today about apprenticeship. So, but let me start, and I'm going to start with you, John, because we were talking about some of the skills gap before. It's an issue we hear about. We certainly write about it a lot in the media. But let me ask you first, is part of the problem a skills gap, or what we're really talking about is a pay gap? Is one point of view is that employers really, part of the problem is just not offering high enough wages, and so that a lot of the talk about a skills gap and increasing the labor force is perhaps tactical in a way of keeping wages down. Is that fair?
I think it's a combination of both. I think there's a problem in both areas. First of all, on the wage issue, it's disappointing to me to see how companies manage their wage structures, because on the public side, we're looking for the lowest possible wages, right? On the private side, we invest in the people. I think there's a significant difference. I've always believed and taken the approach that the last thing I want to talk about is wages. So, our wage structure is pretty good. On the skills gap, and I don't think everybody shares my attitude on that. On the skills side, this has been an ongoing debate, and I think has become much more of an awareness point recently. Look, of course there's a skills gap when companies like mine invest in process, productivity, technology, robotics, automation for growth and stability. So the choice then is to replace people or train them. And perhaps, in my opinion, the most underappreciated fact is that our greatest changeable, improvable asset are our people. So I've always had the opinion that we just need to train them, and forget all the rest. So there is a skills gap. We need to close it, and the way to do that is through workplace education and training.
I want to get back to you in terms of some of the best ways you think of doing that. But first, Amy, let me ask you, because you're actually running one of these programs now in Michigan. And in the last panel, it was interesting to me because two of the issues that came up were about flexibility and about PR in a way, publicity. And it's interesting to me, I've written about the for-profit industry, college industry, and we're all aware of some of the really terrible predatory practices that it's engaged in. But one of the things it's done quite well, one is marketing, and also one of the raps is that they're have at least positioned themselves to be more flexible, perhaps, in community colleges. And I'm wondering if, in your experience in dealing with community colleges in Michigan, those two things have been a problem.
Great question there. The community colleges are a great system for access points. The credentialing is key. The access points are great. But one of the biggest issues that we've had in Michigan, too, is just getting people that are prepared enough to go into community colleges that don't need remediation, which kind of bumps a lot of people out. So Some of the challenges that we've had on the market, all the marketing side has been key, trying to drive people into the right occupations that will provide that return on investment, that will get them the right kind of skills that they need, and to deal with all the other issues around getting the right kind of training and matching it. And it is a marketing issue. Those are huge. I think anything we can do to get people in the door is important, but also making sure that it's aligned and it meets the employer's needs is key.
Just to follow up on that, so is one of the issues you're saying is remediation, that really it's so many failures in the public school system previous to community college that these people, by the time they get there, really aren't even prepared for that level?
Yeah, there's, in my experiences too, running state programs for Michigan and being a part of workforce and economic development for 10 years in Michigan, which has, 10 years ago, we had so many issues on the recession. We had a huge population declines, but then our manufacturing industry came back so quickly that we truly did have a skills gap in addition to the wage gap. And we were looking at 100 different specific talent problems and how to address them. I'm on a committee now looking at how we increase credentialing for adults to get it to some of the around 60%. There's a lot of initiatives going on right now in states, in Tennessee with a free college, to try, how do you really get everyone up to a credential point? The view is to have a little middle-class lifestyle. You have to not only have a high school degree, but something afterwards, whether a PhD, master's, 2-year degree, apprentice, some type of industry-recognized credential is really viewed as the way to a living class lifestyle. But to get there are so many different issues. There's the marketing issues. We don't have enough counselors in high school directing them, so we came up with a Career Jumpstart program to provide better information about high-demand jobs that don't require a 4-year degree to get into high schools to drive them to go into the programs. We addressed the equipment issues by doing a $50 million bond to get more equipment in to the colleges to address some of the issues that were brought around funding for colleges. There's around, a lot of it too is investment by the employers. How do we get the employers at the table? So we did a German model apprenticeship program to try to address that issue. But then also the program with Community Ventures is finding people that have so many barriers around education or employment or a felony record or disability. How do you even get them into the career pathway? And so for them, it's basically a job first, addressing their barriers, but then to really move up from, taking somebody who is in an area of economic despair, and how do you get them to stability by that, $11 an hour, $12 an hour job? But again, to get to the point of middle-class lifestyle, a living wage, which we learned in Montgomery County is $80,000, to get to those living wage jobs, you have to have some additional training, is my belief. But sometimes that needs to come after that person has already found an employer, like a wonderful employer like John, where they're going to take that initial step and get them the work experience, change their trajectory, surround them by people that can give them hope and potential and a pathway, and then you address the additional literacy or GED or high school and then industry-recognized credential programs to really propel them.
So let me just stop you there to go to Walter to pick up on one of the points you made about apprenticeship, which is something that the president has talked about. I think even as we're here, there's a press conference going on over at the Commerce Department announcing an apprenticeship agreement with Switzerland. There was one signed last month with Germany. You've actually been through one. So what are, and there's been this apprenticeship initiative that's been going on for years, and yet it doesn't really seem to have caught on here. And why is that? What are some of the cultural barriers, if that's what it is, or is it other economic barriers that seem to be standing in the way of that?
Obviously, there are a number of barriers there, and we heard some in the first panel already that there are barriers out there. And it starts out, yes, in school, counselors, there's still counselors around. They say everybody has to go to a 4-year college. So that is definitely one thing. Parents, and we are located in North Carolina. In the past was a lot of textile, and also textile is gone. A lot of the parents lost their jobs because manufacturing disappeared. So they don't believe in manufacturing. So it's a whole gamut which really we have to keep working on it. And we have an apprenticeship program called Apprenticeship 2000, we started that 20 years ago, and we are still putting in a lot of effort and really promoting it, marketing it. We are working very, very close with the schools, high schools, to find apprentices. And it took me quite some time. Of course, we were in it already, but then I went to a presentation at a session in Charlotte, and somebody presented the German model. And they said, well, and if students finish school, they look for a company to make an apprenticeship. I said, wow, that's where the difference is. Here, we as a company have to go and look for apprentices, and we put a lot of effort into that just to overcome all those barriers about the 3Ds of manufacturing being dirty, dark, and dead. So we do a lot of effort, put a lot of effort into that and bringing it out to the people. Yes, I have to say over the last few years, we get a lot more support. There's a lot more being talked about, obviously also through the administration really pushing apprenticeships. I hope it's going to make it easier. We have been able to actually create 2 other programs in North Carolina modeled according to Apprenticeship 2000, and there's another one starting this fall. So yes, there is something happening, but apprenticeships is definitely not a household word yet.
Mm-hmm. John, let me go back to you, and you were talking about training. From your point of view as an employer, is the best training coming in terms of a partnership, let's say with a community college, or is it running your own kind of program on site where you're actually training the people yourselves, and which is how many apprenticeships do work in Europe, where it's actually the employers are the one who are kind of running the program?
Yeah, from my perspective, and again, it's my perspective, not necessarily agreed with by everybody, but I view a company such as mine as having a significant social responsibility to the livelihoods of the individuals who are either working with us or around us, suppliers and customers. So we've chosen to take our workforce over the last 20 years, and as opposed to replacing them, to training them. And we do it in-house, on-site, all the way. By the way, what started out as simply a job skill-related program, blueprint reading, gauge reading, basic manufacturing things, has become a program that now extends itself up through an MBA program in-house for our employees, and summer camps for the children, and et cetera, et cetera. But the point is to make this a real community in which people can take part. And now, do we do it ourselves? No. All of our education, for the most part, all of our education is provided by either high school, community college, or college professors. So we're not distracting ourselves with trying to teach people what we're not professionally trained to do. We do it but we have chosen to do it in-house. Although I see and have seen, and I was very interested in that first panel discussion. I have been really interested in watching the sort of redefinition of the community college system and the tech school system, because these institutions have really found, and I think your point was probably underappreciated, but because you've always been doing this, but it's become so apparent that the redefinition of community colleges and tech schools has been to supply or provide an opportunity for these transitional people, as well as people who don't know what they're doing when they come out of high school, but to be able to train themselves or reacquaint themselves with what they don't know or want to know, I guess, so that they can be gainfully employed.
Now, how responsive did you find, at least when you first started, the community colleges were? I did a story a few months ago about welding programs in Texas in the community colleges. And it took a few years for the employers who talked about getting the community colleges to actually change their training and offer the skills that they needed and the kind of training that they needed. Did you have that issue? Was there this kind of lag between what was being taught or making the program respond to exactly the kind of training that you needed for your company?
I'm going to take that over to the tech school side for a second.
Okay.
as well. Look, again, this is a little bit odd. I'm from Rhode Island. It's a strange little place, and it is little. So we have but one thing we do have is an outstanding, probably as good as any state in the country, an education system in terms of the college and community college network. So they tend to like to grab onto things quickly, you know. So if there's a way for them to contribute to preserving jobs in the state of Rhode Island, particularly in the manufacturing area, I think I have found them to be very willing to quickly take part.
Amy, some of the population that you're dealing with in your program is much more difficult, and there's a lot of other issues that a lot of support services that they need. Should community colleges, you know, they're serving so many different populations. Are we essentially asking too much of them to, you know, serve as this kind of bridge perhaps to four-year colleges, to do vocational training, to do kind of remediation of 12 years of public school that aren't bringing them up, to do all these certificates and some of the things that we heard on the first panel. We also know the completion rates at community colleges are quite low.
Yes. No, I do think we're asking too much of them. And a lot of the points that have been made have been coming up in these conversations, especially about the adjunct faculty. We have on this committee that I discussed, we have a representative from the union, and that is definitely the issue that they're focusing on is the cost structure. But there's the funding issues, and that's a whole another ball of wax about how do you fund programs. There is what they get from the K through 12 system. So leaving the population that I am working with on community ventures outside of this piece, I mean, we are just asking too much of them. And especially in Michigan, there's funding issues about do we put the money in the K through 12 and really enforce rigorous graduation standards so people can come in, and how do you address that? Or do you provide more remediation services? There's how the funding flows, that's a mess. I love the model where in Michigan we've done a lot with middle colleges and early colleges where it's basically, you know, you graduate after 13th grade with an associate's degree. And, you know, from 9th or 10th grade, you're dual enrolled between community college and your high school. And these really are taking off. And there's some where industry is very much involved. There's apprenticeship pieces rolled into it. And I don't know exactly how they make it work, but it's free for those students. And so, and they make it work with some incentives and policy changes between the community college system and the K through 12. But I think those are beautiful because they address accessibility, they're industry recognized, usually they graduate with with that credential and the associate's degree. So I think those programs where you can really make sure the incentives are aligned up between K through 12 and community colleges offer a great opportunity for success.
Mm-hmm. Walter, let me go back to you in terms of asking you about what are, let's say, the 2 or 3 main or primary improvements or things that we need to do to really widen acceptability of apprenticeship programs?
I think we go back to what was discussed in the first panel already, marketing. It's bringing the word out that, and it's not just about apprenticeship programs, but you know, we as a manufacturer, advanced manufacturing, what is it? It's exciting. It's a lot more, and a lot of people just have no idea. And I have discussions with the Department of Labor and all the way to the top of Secretary of Labor. And unfortunately, there is no real plan, and I think there is no funding available. That is one of the problems. And we, as a small manufacturer company with 100 people here in the U.S., we can't do that. Mm-hmm. We can only do it very local. And we do as much as it's possible to brand this, to show people that an apprenticeship is not a second-grade education. I think that a lot of people still look at it when they hear apprenticeship, or that's for the ones who don't make it, as was discussed before. But we feel or we see that once we get the parents involved and show them what our program is, because we pay for the tuition at the community college. Of course, they're paid while they're working, and we guarantee them a job at the end. They graduate with an associate's degree in mechatronics. What else do you want? I mean, it can't get much better than this. And it just takes a lot of time to get the point across. And as I said, it's very difficult to find the students who really want to do that. They're out there, there's no doubt about it. And I always say, every one of our apprentices could go through 4-year college, no question in my mind. They're smart enough, that's the people we are looking for. But we're looking for the ones who like to work with their hands. And actually, most of them, when we pick, they say, well, I didn't really want to go to a 4-year college. Right. I'm so glad I found this, because, but I wasn't aware of. I think that awareness is the biggest problem we have.
We've been talking a lot about young people, and obviously, the millennials, right, is a generation finally that's actually exceeded the boomers in terms of size. But, one of the mysteries that has been going on in the declining labor force participation, particularly among men of prime age working years, 25 to 54. So, one of my questions to you is, are you only looking for young people? Would your apprenticeship program, or ones that you're familiar with, be willing to try to draw back perhaps older workers who were in the workforce, perhaps in a different kind of manufacturing job? Or is that really, at that point, does retraining become very difficult?
It's a little bit difficult because the way we 20 years ago, we decided to structure our apprenticeship program basically according to the European model. And I wouldn't just say German, but German, Swiss, Austrian, because we are a group of companies working together. And so that's why we decided it's a youth program. That's how it is done over in Europe for hundreds of years or whatever. Let's do it the same way. There is nothing wrong with retraining older employees. There's no question about it. The problem is, if you take an older employee and put them into an apprenticeship program, the salary structure doesn't really fit very well. But that doesn't mean we can't train. And we had a typical case. We hired last year, in second half of last year, we hired, I think, 10 machinists. We needed to add a second shift, and we had to hire people. We just could not find the people with the right skill. We hired them, and it turned out, even though the resume, interview, everything was well, but then once you put them on a machine, they were not performing. And our manufacturing manager said, well, I can't use them. I said, hold on. Pick at least the ones you think they have a potential, and we have to train them, because if you send them again, we're not going to find anybody else. There's nobody else out there. I'm sorry. We have to do the training. So it's less formal, but we still have to bring them up to the standard, to our expectation.
And how did that work?
It works because he was ready to quit second shift because he didn't have the people, and now suddenly it all works. But we had to push him there because and that's a tendency here in the US compared to Europe. It's a lot of short-term thinking. They're just, okay, now I need it. You have to do something. And the apprenticeship program, our program is a 4-year program. Well, do I know what requirements we have in 4 years? Not exactly. But I plan on growing, and I know we have a whole bunch of people that are going to retire, so I have to bring new people in. There's no other way. Otherwise, I have nothing. And there's quite often the question about apprenticeship program. People ask me, what's the ROI? I laugh at them and said, I don't know. I don't care. Because if I don't do this, I may not be in business in 10 years from now.
John, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, no, this is really, it's music to my ears, because, look, I think one thing you're saying, Walter, that without saying it, is kind of what I said earlier, and that is our people are our greatest asset. Yeah. And they're the one thing that we can, look, a computer's obsolete the minute it goes off the shelf. A car is obsolete when it goes off the lot. But people are never obsolete. And I'm going to tell you, people want to do good. They need the opportunity. And that's why I talk about a community. And that's what my company's all about. Everybody's different. I've just taken that road. And I want to tell a story just quickly about why sort of this is the subject for today. About 6 or 8 months ago, I don't know if anybody else in this room saw this, but there was a headline front page article in USA Today about a company. I'm not sure I have all the facts right, but I never do. But There's a company in Wisconsin, employed 1,000 or 2,000 people. And they supplied the auto industry with something. And it was not a huge town, and so the retirement rate from this company was greater than the, what do you want to say, the
Supply.
replacement rate, right? So they were actually thinking of closing this place, which would have devastated the town. So the company got together with the town and went to the high school. Now, our parents, my parents' generation, were pretty emphatic that we should not go into manufacturing because it was dark, dirty, and dead, right, or whatever you said. So, so we all went to college. You know, we incurred student loans, and we all know the whole story. But this company went to the town and got together with the high school and began bringing in juniors and seniors and their parents to the company. And here's what happened. The parents said, wow, that's not what we remember manufacturing as looking like. And the kids said, holy mackerel, this is like a video game. And I want to do this instead of going to college. So the company convinced them that they could come to work there, make $80,000 or $100,000 a year, whatever it was, and still they would educate them. What a great move. You know, that's a community. It's all about that.
Amy, I'm assuming that you work with various employers in Michigan. John here, obviously, he's sponsoring this panel, so we know you have a social conscience, and you talk a lot about community. Is that your experience with the employers that we seem to have like two kind of visionary business leaders here, but is that what you're hearing from all the employers you're
It's definitely a mix, and it's great when we have visionary employers, and there are a number of them in Michigan. So Fred Keller with Cascade Engineering brought together a group of employers to help train the population that's we call structurally unemployed, people that have education and workforce barriers, and created a consortium of employers where they would enter in one employer and maybe work at $8 an hour making butter balls. And then they might work up into his company where there were more machinist jobs, and then eventually engineering jobs. So it was a nice kind of a group approach that does provide that return on investment. You do by investing in people, you're going to retain them longer, they're going to have skills and grow. But also in Michigan, there's been a dynamic over the years of, right during the recession, you could get highly trained, amazing people for free, almost. And then when the manufacturing swung over, everyone that was still in Michigan was very gainfully employed that had the skills. And so then the bright employers, and a number of them, we did have a number of companies that came together and formed a consortium to train and invest like this. And so we had a small group of employers that were really willing to do the investment, but a lot of them were so used to either government providing the training or them not needing to do anything to get good people. And when the transition switched, we would hear a lot of whining about the government should solve this problem for us. And the smart employers and the ones that really could see the return would invest. And the line would be like, well, what if I invest in all my people and then they leave? And then the other conversation, well, what if you don't invest and they stay? So when the pain for businesses gets great enough, even if they don't have a social conscience, they will usually make some changes to stay in business. But there's a huge gamut that we've seen in Michigan.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, and now to return to this issue of wages, which is something that you brought up, is that, did we get into a situation, we've seen wages stagnate now over more than a couple of decades, but certainly coming out of the recession where wages have been pretty depressed, you said you could kind of practically get any talent. And is there just this, again, are we seeing just this reluctance of employers to offer higher wages after a period where they didn't have to?
It's been changing, again, because of the pain points, and we are starting to see increase in wages. It's really a supply and demand issue. Although in some industries, for instance, truck driving, which gets a lot of press, and I've had a group discussion with about 30 truck driving employers at the state, there's still so many systemic issues in that industry that really raising the wages is just one component. Mm-hmm. But in general, I think we are starting to see that because of supply and demand.
One thing that also happened, I didn't mean to.
Right.
One thing that also happened after the recession in 2008 was people realized with the downsizing, particularly the financial institutions and the insurance companies like that. I sat in this room one time and made this comment that we were in 2009 that we were going to see a jobless recovery. And in fact, we were there before that because as we invested in productivity, we didn't need to hire more people. Okay, so we've grown the business from $30 million with 500 people to $250 million with 500 people. Important thing is they're the same 500 people, for the most part. And so I think investing in them as you go, the payback, you want to talk about ROI, I don't allow that to be talked about in terms of our education program because I think it would cheapen it. But I'll give you the statistic. Our turnover rate at TACO on 500 or 600 people is less than 0.5%. So that's in an industry with an average of 30%. So that's the ROI. Do the math.
Yeah.
Walter, your thoughts on
Well,
that?
I think, the salaries, it is an issue because obviously every manufacturer tries to keep their costs down. But on the other hand, if I have a properly trained or skilled person, I much rather pay them $5 more an hour because they're more productive than if I have somebody that doesn't measure up to par. So it comes back to the training. And you started out talking about the skills gap. The question is, do we have a skills gap or is it a training gap? I think it's more of a training gap.
Yep.
If we do the right training, we can get the people there. And if we have the right trained people, that means we have the skilled people, we can afford to pay more. But we can't afford to pay high salaries to people who don't perform well.
Right, right. And in your experience, let me pose you the question that I was asking John about in terms of doing your own training versus a kind of partnership with a community college. From your point of view, what works better?
Well, obviously with the apprenticeship, we do the hands-on training as a company, and that's all. It's first year, most of the apprentices we take in are actually seniors in high school. So the first year, they still have to go to high school half a day. The other half a day, they work as a company. And then the second through the fourth year, they go 1 day a week to school. We work together with Piedmont Community College, and I have to say, we have an excellent, excellent relationship with them. They really responded. Well, 20 years ago, when we put this thing together, they didn't really know much about it either. But they really coped with us, and they do what we need. CPCC runs special classes for us. They adapt their schedule for us. And it starts with scheduling, just a little thing. They may offer a lot of the classes we need for our apprentices already, but one class may be on Monday, 2 on Wednesday, another one on Friday. That doesn't work for us. So they have to schedule that our apprentices can take all the classes they need in 1 day. And they have to make sure that all our apprentices, not just from Detweiler, but from the other partner companies within Apprenticeship 2000, get into those classes. And maybe a quick word about why a partnership. We only take 2 apprentices per year. Well, if I go to CPCC or even to a high school and say, well, I'm looking for 2 people, I have 2 people, they laugh at me. It's not enough momentum here. But as a whole, with Apprenticeship 2000, we can fill a whole class at CPCC, so they can do something special for us. And that's a key to it. We alone could not have done this. There's no question.
So do you think that these kind of agreements that the government is engaging in, whether it's with Switzerland or Germany, that the government can, provide the kind of momentum and organization that's needed to create these kind of partnerships, or is it something that really business needs to do itself?
Well, everybody has a piece in there. But to me, an apprenticeship program has to be industry-driven because you have to have the industry, the employer, who is willing to get going. The rest of it, to me, is easier to get going. There's still stumbling blocks, as I said, parents and educators and so on. But if you don't have industries who sees that they have a need to do that, it's not going to work. Government is not going to be able to put it all together and provide it. That's not going to happen. The agreements with Germany and Switzerland, I think they're going to help. And what I see is over the last, especially the last 6 months, 12 months, is a lot being talked about apprenticeships. And maybe because I'm so deep into it. I hear it every day. I hear something. So, but I think it's really, there's a lot happening. And as I said before, I have really good contacts with the Department of Labor. There is an enormous amount going into it right now to promote apprenticeships, to get it going. And that's going to make it easier for us because then we don't have to do as much selling because people already know about it. And I hope I will see the day when students are coming and knocking on our door and say, hey, I want to make an apprenticeship. Do you have an opening? I'm probably not going to make that, but...
And I could chime in maybe
Yes,
briefly
please.
on that piece too, because in Michigan we did have a consortium approach with government, industry, and colleges. And it was very challenging, but we had great leadership for our employers, which is absolutely key. We also, because so many employers were at the table, the colleges were willing to make the changes because a lot of them were like, yeah, we've heard this before, we design a program, nobody gets hired, and it's a loss for the colleges. So, but with enough employers, you can get the colleges to change. And government was good, I think, because we were able to show some credibility. We could tap into some of the other programs in high schools and colleges and do the marketing. But the industry was very clear, and this was an approach that our governor went to Germany, came back and said, we need a German model program, and we're like, okay, we're on it. And we brought those employers in, but they were very clear, okay, government is changing. We cannot rely on government. We've got to get this thing out of government's hands as quickly as possible, make sure it's industry driven. So I think those three components are key, but without the industry really leading it and putting the skin in the game, it's not going to be as effective.
And I think government can help to get more industry involved because what I have seen in North Carolina, in the 3 programs we have running right now based on Apprenticeship 2000, the majority of the companies are European-based. It's a lot easier to sell to them because they know what it is.
They're familiar with
and they
it.
don't ask about an ROI because
Right.
they just do it. And so we just have to get more American companies involved and really get them to the point that they realize they have to do something. The government is not going to solve the problem.
Right. I'm going to throw it open to questions, but I just want to, John, to get your, you speak to other business owners. Obviously, this is something that you yourself has invested in. When you talk to other entrepreneurs or business owners, is this something that they are open to, or does it sound so alien to them that there's a lot of resistance?
Apprentice programs?
Yes,
Yeah.
or other variations on these kind of training programs that isn't immediately looking at the return on investment in the short term.
Right back to the public versus private company thing. The public guys are generally looking for the quick
Next quarter.
number and the ROI. Guys like me are investing in our people. I mean, I don't want to keep repeating this. It's a community of wonderful, wonderful people who I love with all my heart and soul. I'm going to invest there so that we can stay there and together. The people around me, I see, by and large, want to do this kind of thing. Because this whole discussion has evolved over the last few years, I think, a long way from where it was in terms of the reemergence of manufacturing and therefore the need for reinvestment in the people side. And I think companies all over are seeing the value of it. So I think much more receptive. And the apprentice thing is something that is beginning to gain momentum, but I don't think we as Americans fully understand it. It's a cultural difference that we have, right? And unfortunately, because it's a great program.
Right, because one of actually, when I was thinking culturally, is that probably one of the knocks is that it's very narrowing or limiting to people young in their career who may not know exactly what they want to do yet. And if they go down this kind of tunnel, can they not get out?
Well, I think there is also the misunderstanding. A lot of people think an apprenticeship is just a dead-end street. You make an apprenticeship and you're stuck in there. Well, as you said in the beginning, I made an apprenticeship in Switzerland many, many moons ago, and I'm not out in the shop on a lathe on a milling machine anymore. But I have the basic understanding. I know what it's all about. And there are plenty of opportunities after. To me, I always say an apprenticeship program, that's a foundation. And if you have a solid foundation, you can build on top of that whatever you want. You can go in any direction. And a real typical example, we also have apprentices as welder fabricators. We had one graduated, I think, about 4 years ago, worked for us, and about 2 years ago we were looking for a service technician. Of course, a service technician has to have mechanical, electrical, hydraulics and everything. And he said, I would like to travel a little bit. And since we are running all our apprentices, there's a mechatronics program at CPCC. He already had some electronics. He was in our electronics department. That's just part of the apprenticeship program. We don't just teach welding, fabricating. We give him a much broader thing. He qualified. We gave him some additional training in electronics, and off he went as a serviceman. And now he's actually transitioning into sales. So doors are open.
Oh, okay. So let's open it to the audience. If there's any questions, raise your hand. We've got microphones on the end there.
Yes, hello, my name is Annette Berghoff, and I would just have a brief question concerning exactly these career paths that then open up in industry. You said that for the more European-based companies, it's not a problem if you have an apprenticeship and then you go on to higher levels. What is it like for the US companies? Would you say that apprentices at some point will hit some kind of glass ceiling where people will say, if you want to progress further, you will need a college degree? Or would you say that US-based companies are as open and will allow these career paths?
And I think that depends on where you want to go. I not say that a 4-year degree is wrong. But if you have a 2-year degree, you can go on. And let's face it, if I look for an engineer, and that engineer has made an apprenticeship before he got his degree, I'm probably going to hire that one because that person has experience. That engineer also thinks about how am I going to manufacture that when they design something. So that's again, it's another path which is open, and we have apprentices once they graduate. Some of them immediately go on and get their 4-year degree. Other ones may work for a while and then go. So all those possibilities are there. It's not a dead end.
Yeah, my experience in general with working with hundreds of employers is in general, yes. But there are going to be some jobs that require specific degrees and skills. But in general, if someone comes in and they're working really well on the line, those are transferable skills. They can usually move up into a supervisor position. They can get some additional skills and training or an apprenticeship to move into a skilled trades position. If they really want to go into an engineering or designing work, if they're already doing well at a company, many times those employers, again, they want to keep them. They want to invest in their good employers. So they will put them through a night program to get additional training and a degree to move around. So I see a lot of fluidity in American companies.
Yeah, you know, just to that point, there are jobs that require a degree. An engineer, generally, to put a stamp on something and for approval needs to have the ability to do. It's like having a lawyer, an in-house lawyer versus a paralegal, right? I mean, there's a difference there. It doesn't mean that the paralegal isn't more qualified than most lawyers, right? But I think there is a place. In my company, again, I talk about it like it's a little incubator, but I mean, there's a whole lot of people in the management end of the business now who were working with me in the plant years and years ago, and they're now product managers, sales folks, and you know, so if you invest in them, I'm telling you, people want to do good. They want to grow and prosper. They just need to be provided the opportunity.
And I think on top of it, there are higher jobs out there which a lot of companies think they need a special degree, but it's not necessarily. Sometimes experience replaces that.
That's exactly
degree.
right.
This woman over here.
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Rosemary Segero. I'm a president of an organization called Hope for Tomorrow, based here in Washington, D.C., and I'm also an entrepreneur. Looking at your discussion from the first discussion and the second, how do you look at working with international colleges doing what we are doing? We've started a program from daycare, teaching them to become entrepreneurs as they grow up to high school, to elementary, to high school, and to college. So how do you look at international part, looking at what you are doing, or what would you advise, like what I'm doing in Kenya and other African countries, like what you are doing, training and community colleges? Thank you.
I look at not only at the international education environment, but also the business environment as being critically important. To your point about the whole apprentice issue is a good example of that, because we need to transcend these cultural barriers somehow, and one way to do it is to, I think, to be involved with the international community in general, as we're part of it, not as if we're teaching it. I don't know if that answers the question at all, but that's how I sort of view that.
And you know, we can take imported or stole the system from Europe, let's say, Switzerland in this case, in our case, kind of. But we also do an exchange. We started that last year. We actually took 3 of our Swiss apprentices. They came over here to the States for 3 months, and it was a wonderful experience. Not just for those 3 apprentices, but also for the whole company, for our company, the employees. They just embraced them, and that cultural exchange that happened, I felt like we had a morale boost. Mm-hmm. It was really great, and we have 2 more coming over, I think, next week, so it's going to start all over again. We're looking forward to that because I think it's a great thing. We are also talking about getting some U.S. apprentices over to our company in Switzerland. We still work out the school because obviously, while they're apprentices, they have to go to school, so we have to find a way. In Switzerland, they have a little bit more of a break in school, but the apprentices who were over here last summer, they had to do homework. They had homework assigned, and we're working with CPCC to see how we can do it, maybe even video conferencing into their classroom. Because I don't have a problem if we have apprentices over in Switzerland and they spend 1 day a week in an office, and because otherwise, if they would be here in the States, they would also go to school for 1 day. So we're working on that. But I think it's important because that cultural exchange, and I know it's cultures are a little bit closer between Switzerland and the US than it is to Kenya, but just that, it made a big difference. And I mean, and I know they still have contact, they're emailing and FaceTiming or whatever with each other. That builds a relationship which is going to last.
Other questions in the audience? Let me ask you one here, which is I want to go back to this issue of for-profit schools, which even though the industry has certainly contracted a lot, you know, a lot of these schools are promising these kind of technical certificates and training and connections. I mean, are there any out there that are living up to the promise?
I'll throw one in. There's an example of Moran Ironworks is a company in Michigan that does very large-scale welding. And they did go to their community college, but the curriculum, and they were just one employer, and so trying to align the curriculum was different, and they didn't offer enough really in-depth experiences on welding. So they created their own industrial arts academy up in this little remote area in Michigan. The students have to pay $12,000. They do help with some of the fundraising. Many of the folks that come out of that are hired by Moran Ironworks. But other ones, I mean, the program is so good and the technical skills are so great that they learn, and they're learning from a master welder who does these amazing feats. And so it's actually paying off, but it's a high demand area. It's done by direction from industry, and you do what you pay for. I mean, the students are getting amazing jobs coming out of that at $70,000 to $90,000 a year in high demand areas, and they have a wait list of people trying to go into the training program. So if all those components are in place for a proprietary school, I think you can find good success.
Question over there.
Hi, I'm Catherine McClellan with the Manufacturing Institute. I know that ROI has come up a few times, so I just wanted to give a quick plug for an ROI calculator that our organization's actually in the process or production stages of developing. So please keep us in mind as you're looking for that in the future. My question for the panelists is, a lot of issues with the community colleges, and we heard this in the last panel too, is that they offer these programs and then employers come and cherry pick them before they've actually completed the credential. And so that hurts the community colleges. It helps the employers, and I understand you need the people right when you need them. But is this a policy change that we can make, or do we need to think about how to change the definition of completion and what that looks like? Or I just want to get your opinions. Or do we need to have a conversation with the employers to really press them to stay or to let the
Yeah,
students
good luck with
finish.
that. Yeah, I do think that changing the definition needs to match up so you can align colleges with what they're supposed to do. Obviously, encouraging the employers and the students to try to finish that credential is good for both of them long term. But I don't. Yeah, it's hard to really align all these different motivations sometimes.
Well, I mean, it's interesting going back to the last panel, which is, we've have this kind of drive, which we see all across education, to kind of quantify success. And I think one of the things that comes up is whether completions is really the only measure of success, and whether isn't it equally successful to get somebody a job. And so the question is, how can we change or think about changing the statistical measurements in order to capture what most people would see as a successful outcome? And I know this was an issue with the welding programs that I did in Texas, that I wrote about in Texas, where they were saying the same things, where the employers were essentially hiring them before they finished. And from everybody's point of view, that was a success story, but not from their statistics.
On our side, of course, there is always, when I talk to other companies, they say, well, should I educate those people? And then they go to the competition. We don't see that, because I think that 4-year apprenticeship program builds so much loyalty. Our apprentices, when they graduate, they don't want to leave. They want to stay with the company. And that goes back to the community. They feel like they're part of it, and they want to stay. So we don't have any contracts. We guarantee our apprentices that they get a job upon graduation, but they have no obligation to stay. If they want to leave the next day, they can. But our experience clearly is they're not leaving.
Can I just make one point, Tom, just real quick? You all are going to think I live in La La Land. I'm convinced after I say this. But one thing that I view as an obligation in my company, our company. Look, remember I said it's called TACO? TACO is not for everybody, and everybody is not for TACO. So at some point in time, people part ways, either by their own or not. My hope as a community is that if somebody leaves TACO, they are better for it and are capable of jumping to the head someplace else. And it's come back to be the case.
Here, I'm going to go here I don't think you had a question before.
So I'm Tom Bailey from the Community College Research Center. I know there are cases when students are, recruited out of classes and don't finish. I mean, I've heard that ever since I've been studying community colleges, which is, but it's not a large enough amount to show up in data. I mean, there's still a strong benefit to completing either a certificate or an associate's degree compared to just taking some courses. Now, hidden in there may be some substantial number of people who are recruited out of their welding class before they finish. But I guess I know there are examples, but I would be a little bit skeptical about this as a major movement or a major factor in talking about today.
Yeah, I think the study that I've been focused on around getting credentialing is that there are quite a few people that have been identified. I don't remember the exact percentage of people that have some college experience, whether it's community college or they went to a 4-year degree and dropped out. There is a large population around there, and devising strategies for them to somehow get that completion, I do think would help them be credentialed, and it shows a stronger workforce, especially in a local community that's trying to attract more businesses. So I do think there's something there, but how you get at it, especially if someone is employed and making a lot of money and they don't feel the need, is a challenge, I think.
Celeste Carter, could I add, just since I was the one who said cherry picking, I thought I should add that it was a very small percentage of the people that were in the program. And typically a year or maybe 2 years or maybe even 3, they'd be back knocking on my door saying, I want to finish. So they saw the value, and usually the company they were working for paid for them to come back, gave them flexible work hours, allowed them to come back and pay their tuition so that they did finish, because then they saw that as being a more valuable employee.
And is that not necessarily a bad model if people come back? So I think we have time probably for one more question over here. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mindy Reiser. I had the opportunity to evaluate vocational training programs funded by USAID in some developing countries. But my question is to John. You said something, I think, which is quite pregnant with meaning about public companies and privately held companies. And I'm wondering if this is really significant. In Germany, it's well known for these middle range companies that are owned by families for generations, and there's a real investment in the people in the community. I'm wondering, when we're talking about mega corporations which respond to Wall Street and investment companies and hedge fund managers, if this is the same story, if we're really talking about a very different definition of what it is to own a business and what it is to care for the human well-being of your employees. I'd like to hear some thoughts on that.
Very briefly, yes, I think there's a huge difference. And I think it because I see it. And I see it up close and personal by evaluating the way we operate versus some of my competitors. I'm blessed with having competitors that operate that way, okay? Because the loyalty is different than it is in not all of them. I don't mean all of them, but some, and the ones that I care operate that way. But I think there is a big difference because the whole driver behind public companies is the stock price. And that is only achievable in markets where pricing doesn't move that rapidly. It's only achievable by cost, and in a very short term. I don't care about the short term, and I have the luxury of not caring about the short. I have to stay in business, but I can invest in where I see fit. And somebody called me a visionary. I never thought of myself as that. I just love people, and so that's where I've chosen to invest my time and resources. But public companies, big ones, generally don't have that luxury.
Well, actually, I have seen both. Siemens, big German company, actually was part of Apprenticeship 2000 for a while. And I think the reason was they want to get an apprenticeship program going, and they have a big plant in Charlotte. So obviously jumping on our bandwagon was the quickest way of getting it going. They, in the meantime, decided to do it at their own, but they still keep going with apprenticeship programs. So it's a positive separation we have there. On the other hand, we have one partner company, the local company that is in the partnership really wanted to keep going. And suddenly from the head office, there comes the directive, well, we have to cut cost, no more apprentices. There's nothing we can do from our little level here because that came up from corporate. So yes, that is, and typically, as John said, a public company has to make sure the next quarter is okay. The numbers are right for the quarter. Same, we are privately owned. If we lose money one quarter, okay, that's not that bad as long as we know we're going to make progress. Nobody gets fired because we lose money because at the first quarter.
All right, well, that's a good note to end on. Thank you all so much for participating in the panel. Thank you all.